Okay, let's talk about how to improve roleplay for Dungeons & Dragons players. I'm going to be addressing mostly our group, my group that I DM for, since I expect that this probably won't be watched by too many people outside of that group of people, and I'm mostly doing it to help you guys in some way. So, good roleplay. Okay, good roleplay should adhere to the same two rules as good writing for a TV or a film. And good writing in a TV or a film always accomplishes one of two things. So any scene in a decent movie or a decent TV show will either move the plot forward or it will reveal some information to the audience. And Dungeons & Dragons decent roleplay should follow the same rules, in my opinion. If you're going to roleplay something either as a DM or as a player, it should either move the story forward or it should convey some important information or relatively important information to the audience. Now, you might think, we don't have an audience, it's a Dungeons & Dragons game. The audience is the other players. So you are the audience for the other people at the table, so you should pay attention to them. But they are also your audience, and consequently, it's a really good idea to think about your roleplay as a performance. And that's true whether you are the DM or if you're a player. Because everybody, in order to play a Dungeons & Dragons game, the group basically has to commit to spending time together. And so if the game isn't fun, then what's the point? What that means is if you are taking center stage, if you are spotlighted because you are role-playing, then your role-play, in my opinion, you should be aiming to try and entertain the other people at the table. And so your role-play needs to either move the plot forward or it needs to reveal some information, usually about your character, to the other players. And hopefully that information is in some way interesting, even if it's just a personality trait about your character, right? So you roleplay something, you describe something, and the other characters, the other players at the table realize, oh, this person is kind, or this person is inquisitive. Just reveal something about the character themselves. Roleplay within a game can be broadly, I think, separated into three different categories. I think first, okay, let's talk about, before we get to that, let's talk about a couple of common pitfalls that players can fall into with their role-playing. The first one is that all of their role-play is based around objective solving, and otherwise they don't role-play. This is, give you an example of what I mean by this. If a person's roleplay is always based around, my character wants to go shopping because I need to buy items, or I'm only going to roleplay when the DM puts a scenario in front of us that we need to solve. So we're trying to save the princess. She's been captured by bandits and she's being held in an abandoned mine. We're outside the abandoned mine. There are two guard bandits on duty. How does my character solve this problem? Well, maybe I cast a sleep spell. Maybe I pull out my bow and I shoot them from the bushes. Maybe I cast disguise self and I walk over and I try and blag my way in, right? All of that is roleplay, but it's all based around solving an objective that is perceived by the player. And they can make up their own objective, like wanting to go shopping, or they can be tackling an objective that's been put in the front of them by the DM. Either way. That's objective-based roleplay. It's fine. And like I said, roleplay should move the plot forward, okay? One of the things that roleplay should do is move the plot forward, and that is what that roleplay does, and it is important. The pitfall is, if that is the only roleplay that you're doing, then I think you're doing a disservice to the other people at the table. And it takes a little while to move past that stage in your kind of development as a Dungeons & Dragons player. A lot of new players will only do that because it's intimidating to do anything else, and that's fine. So I would say that's like a level one of roleplay is being able to do that. The other pitfall of roleplay mistakes that players, I think, fall into is pretty much all players think their character is cool, and you should, because you're going to be playing them for probably quite a while, so you should like them and think that they are interesting. The pitfall that some players fall into is that they spend all their roleplay time trying to make other people think that their character is cool. And I understand the urge to do that. But you won't see that in a decent film or a TV show. A decent film or TV show won't really invest time in trying to make you think that the character is cool, because that isn't really a compelling story. Tell people, your audience, about your character, communicate that through the roleplay, but simply trying to get everybody to think that your character is cool is I would say it's baby steps. It's a beginner's thing when it comes to roleplay, and I think a player has to move past that. And I'm talking to my group, our group. I'm not accusing anybody of doing that, but I think it is something that you may notice in some generic D&D players is a thing. So what does good roleplay look like? So as I mentioned before, I think good roleplay can be separated into 3 different categories. Each of these categories can be used to move the plot forward or convey information to the audience. The first category is your objective solving roleplay. Okay, so it's normally in response to the DM putting a challenge in front of you, whether that is interrogate this prisoner or rescue the princess or go and uncover the information that you need in order to find the MacGuffin, right? Objective-based roleplay is important. It plays a big part in Dungeons & Dragons games. It doesn't really bear talking about too much because most people, that's like bread and butter. You don't really need to be taught too much on how to do that. Most of the time, objective-based roleplay is done in the first person. So you say, I do this, or my character does this, and you're describing things from your own perspective. The second type of roleplay is dialogue, which is a little bit trickier. Can take new players a little bit longer to get used to the idea of speaking in character and being able to actually have a conversation with another person where you are responding to the things that they say. That can be hard. It takes a little bit of getting used to. I think in our group, we've gotten really good at this. Our characters are really good at having conversations. The pitfall that people can fall into with dialogue is remembering that dialogue needs to move the story forward. Whether that is in terms of the actual plot, like revealing new information or learning new information, or conveying something to the audience and telling them something about the character or the world or the situation that the characters are in. If it's not doing that, then dialogue doesn't really serve a purpose. If your characters are talking about, the weather, that doesn't serve a purpose unless you are, for example, trying to convey the fact that your characters feel awkward, right? If you're trying to convey the idea of 2 characters being socially awkward around one another, then that's actually really good roleplay. But if you're just doing it because you feel like your characters should have a conversation, but there isn't actually a point to the conversation, then you're kind of just taking up space. So dialogue needs to have a point. If you're going to have dialogue, there needs to either be one of the characters is trying to achieve something, or one of the characters, or even both of the characters, are conveying information to the players, not the player characters, the players. They are uncovering information for the players and telling a story, basically. The third kind of roleplay is the one that I think takes the longest to get used to because it isn't intuitive, and that is roleplay that is done usually from the third person perspective that tells a story about what a character is thinking or feeling. What do I mean by this? Let me paint a scene for you. Let's pick a character. Okay, let's pick one of the NPCs. We're going to have Jessica Stormsurge, okay, a character we haven't seen for a little while. So Jessica was the leader of effectively a mercenary outfit based in the city who also were part of the criminal underworld. So they're called the Woad Raiders. They're like a motorcycle gang, except they don't have motorcycles, they have horses and boats. And they all wear sort of different grades of tartan. Okay. And Jessica is pretty young. But she basically got the blessing of the Stormlord a couple of years ago. And when she got shipwrecked, and as a result, she can like magically summon a rage and conjure lightning. Okay. And so she accidentally became leader of the Woad Raiders when the former leader, who was a drunken brute, tried to assault her, and she like accidentally killed him in a bar brawl. And so she became the leader of the Woad Raiders. Anyway, In the context of the story, the Woad Raiders were taken over by somebody else, and she was kind of ousted, partly because she wasn't the best leader. She had a good heart, but she didn't tend to put the Woad Raiders first, which is maybe what she should have done as a leader. And so somebody else came along and gained the support of everybody else and kind of threw her out in a fairly bloody coup. And that was the last time that the players saw Jessica. They're friends with Jessica. They supported her, but ultimately they were ousted. So Jessica left along with a couple of her supporters, as well as her younger sister, and they are exiles from somewhere else, basically. And so I'll set the scene for you. Jessica, along with Brannock, her kind of right-hand man, and her younger sister have just arrived in a small rowboat on a beach about 10 miles north of the city. And the boat lands on the shore. Jessica jumps out, although there is a tiredness to her, and Brannock climbs out after her. Brannock's kind of got one eye on her at all times, just trying to get a bead on how she's feeling. Jessica's not really paying too much attention. The two of them drag the rowboat up the beach after Jessica's sister gets out. And Jessica sits down, and you can see like all of the energy is just drained from her. And Brannock says he's going to go and get some firewood. I'm not going to do Brannock's voice right now. Brannock says he's going to go and get some firewood and checks to make sure that Jessica's sister is okay and she doesn't need anything. So Jessica just sits on the shore. Brannock goes into the trees about 50 yards away to get some firewood together. Jessica kind of runs the sand through her hands, picks up a stone, and just throws it into the sea. Her sister sits about 10 feet away, not fully comprehending the situation, because she wasn't part of the Woad Raiders. And then Jessica just lies back in the sand and stares at the sky with a troubled look on her face. Now, notice that in that scenario, I've not told you what Jessica's thinking. But you can infer it for yourself based on the description. And the entire description is in third person. Okay. But that description tells the audience, which in this case is you, but it could also be other players at the table. It tells you something about where Jessica is at mentally. Okay, based on the description of her having this dejected air to her. And even though I never said it, you're imagining the idea that she's got her shoulders slumped, right? Because she has no energy, which is why I actually said. That kind of third-person description is something that I think players should do. And it takes a while to get used to that idea, because you are trying to imagine your character from the perspective of somebody else. So that situation describes Jessica, but it's not through her eyes. It's through the eyes of somebody looking at the situation. And learning to do that as a player and think about what your character looks like to an outside observer, even if there isn't an outside observer, can allow you to paint a picture for the audience, for the other players, that tells them something about your character. And if you watch Critical Role, you'll see the players do this all the time. They will switch from talking about their characters in the first person, saying, I do this, and then speaking as their characters. They will switch to talking about their characters in third person. So Liam will talk about Caleb in episode 1, where Caleb wakes up in the bed, and Caleb is described by Liam in the third person. Okay, because he's talking about what Caleb is doing, even though nobody else is seeing what Caleb is doing. So he's describing it from the perspective of a camera that is looking at him and showing the audience what Caleb is actually doing. I think that's pretty important. I think in our game it's something I'd like to see a lot more of. We've gotten very good at the sort of the first two kinds of roleplay, objective-based roleplay and dialogue. I think to some extent we need to work on making sure that our dialogue accomplishes something. So if you're going to start a conversation with another character, there needs to be a goal in mind. Whether it's seeing how they're feeling or trying to learn something about them that you maybe don't understand or that intrigues you. Right. And then the third kind of roleplay is, like I say, something that I think we can work on a little bit, which is being able to describe your character from a third-person perspective as though a camera is on them, showing something to the audience. I think the upgraded version of that is being able to do it in a way where you aren't explicitly saying what a character is thinking or feeling. You're just communicating it through the description of what they are doing and what their demeanour is. Anyway, I think that's all I got for now. There we go.